the reason I like analogies so much is just because of the way I like to learn. I really benefit from having something have a direct correlation. And I'll give you an example. You often teach beginners in jiu-jitsu, like complete beginners in jiu-jitsu, you teach them self-defense first. Why is that? Well, because if you grab someone who doesn't train jiu-jitsu and you go, all right, we're going to start here in spider guard, holding the sleeve foot on the bicep. They're going to do this. I'm going to do this. They're like, okay, A, why would I hold their sleeve? Why would I put a foot on the bicep? And why would he do that? None of this makes sense. But if you make a correlation, like they don't have to have ever been in a fight, but if you say someone tries to punch you and you do this, they can make a direct connection. And therefore it makes sense and it's more memorable. So I always like to draw analogies like that. So I'm often describing jiu-jitsu techniques, and well, there's so many I can't even think of one off the top of my head. But like something.
Motorbike.
Yeah, there's times I'll tell people to roll their wrist over, and I'll say it's like decelerating on a motorbike. So anyone who rides a motorbike is like, and that's an instant, correlation and memorable. One that I don't mention it that often because living in Sydney, I've learned that not many of my students ride horses, but I grew up in the country riding horses. And if you've ever ridden a horse, and I said to you it's like when you're doing a seated trot and you need to you can't just sit on a horse. For those who don't know, if you just sit on a horse, when a horse runs, right, trots, canters, right, they're different gaits. When a horse runs, if you just sit on it, you get bounced off the horse and you'll fall off it. Like you literally have to ride the horse and move your body and hips in a certain way in tune with the gait of the horse. And so that's very similar to when you have mount on someone, which is when you're sitting on their belly or whatever. And so sometimes I'll say that, how when you're like riding a horse, you have to do this, like you have to feel what they're doing with their hips and your hips. And anyone who rides a horse, like it's an instant, they're like, oh man, it's the exact same thing, right? But as I said, being in Sydney, I've learned that not many of my students have ever ridden a horse. So that analogy kind of doesn't work very well. But I think that's why I really like analogies, because you can draw direct connections, and that direct connection and correlation, I think it helps. That's at least how I like to learn. But then I have people who don't even necessarily learn that way come back to me and be like, oh man, I was rolling this, and then I remembered like on the motorbike. I'm like, yeah, bro, like that's why I enjoy it.
You got it.
And they're also funny. Sometimes they're not all good. I'll say that. Not all my but when they're good, they're good.
It's like when you're going to get a haircut and forget about that analogy. It doesn't work.
I don't know if you were in the gym. Let me tell a funny anecdote. I don't know if you were in the gym this time, but I was demonstrating the technique on Aaron, and as I mentioned before, Aaron's the guy who teaches the kids classes, and I was doing the technique on Aaron, and I can't remember what the technique was, but I was saying something like, I wanted to essentially say, if his leg is all floppy, you'll do this, or if it's stiff, you'll do this, or something like that. And I said, if his leg's all floppy like cooked spaghetti, is what I said, right? And then Aaron was leaving his leg like really stiff and straight. And I'm like, no, Aaron, like cooked spaghetti. And he's like leaving his leg like stiff and straight and locked out. And I'm like, no, like floppy and soft, like cooked spaghetti, And then anyway, moved on, showed the technique. And then like 45 minutes later, just so we're well past that, and people are doing their thing in the class. Everyone just hears out of nowhere Aaron go, oh, cooked spaghetti. Like, oh, bro. So yeah,
kept hearing uncooked spaghetti.
Yeah, so they're not all great, the analogies, but when they make sense, I actually sometimes I can't believe I can't think of any more off the top of my head because I use so many. But yeah,
you do. But like some of them are consistent with almost every position, like the over, under, over.
Yeah, right.
Which you keep referring to.
Yeah, so that's another one. Sometimes, people will. I just think it does such a good job to solidify it in your brain. Yeah, so people will ask. So again, I'm trying to describe this for people who know nothing about jiu-jitsu, but there's certain positions where it matters the order of operations, and over under is one of them. So people will ask in a position, they'll be like, wait, which one's on top? And I'll say like, well, look back at the other one. If the other one is under, then this one will be over. But then I'll do more than that, and I'll say it's like lattice work, or plaid, right? Or then I like to refer to, or like pie crust on an apple pie, over under, and then as soon as you describe it like that, they have a visual representation, because everyone can picture like that lattice work that's in an outdoor garden or a pie, and it helps a lot. So things like, it's definitely consistent. And as you know, there are plenty of positions where you need to know, like the over, under, right? And then with time, it becomes autonomous. You don't even think about it.
Yeah, not autonomous for me yet.
I mean, I still think about pie a lot, so don't worry.
Just any excuse to think about pie, why Adam does BJJ. But then there are also these like beautiful other metaphors, which I keep seeing coming from it. Like just cutting the angle. Like just always finding a new way to approach a situation, or just doing the finishing touches as well.
Yeah, it's all in like cutting the angle is a good one, because it's physically applicable in jiu-jitsu, but it's also theoretically applicable, as in like the chest side of it. Cutting the angle, meaning to come at it from a different angle, take a different approach, right? Circle around, whatever. And man, maybe that's you. Maybe you work in IT and you're stuck on a coding problem or something, and you could, a similar thing, right? Cutting that, like, come at it from a different angle and, look at it from a different point of view or whatever. And a lot of this, I don't know, like, it's interesting to have it pointed out, because I don't necessarily sit down and think about it before I say something like that. But, when you do sit and think, like, that has impacts on my daily life without even realizing it.
Even as simple as changing a baby's nappy, you got to control the hips, not the legs. Yeah, really important.
Funny, right? Yeah. Man, there's things like that. Honestly, like when Atlas, like my son, won't lie flat for me, like, I'm like, well, if I just pin that shoulder, I don't need to like hold just that one. He can't move. Like.
Or holding my daughter and she's trying to get away, or she's crying or whatever, and it's just not the right time to let it go. Learn how to do a gable grip.
That's right.
It works a lot better. Or teaching your child how to do a gable grip, just to hang around the neck, because you train jiu-jitsu, you don't mind that pressure on your neck.
That's right.
With it. Yeah, there you go. You can hold on that way while we go through the topic.
That is Don't you find though the actual training jiu-jitsu makes you incredibly more physically resistant to discomfort? And one of my favorite analogies actually is drawing parallels between surfing and jiu-jitsu. So in the beginning, students will often really struggle with the discomfort and the pressure of jiu-jitsu, because when you think about it, if you don't train jiu-jitsu or wrestling, some type of grappling, and like prior to jiu-jitsu, when would you say was the last time you had someone forcibly like lie down on top of you or hold you down? Like for the average person, they would say, oh, not since I was a kid, so beginners, people new to jiu-jitsu, often struggle with that discomfort, and they tap, being, the tapping being when you give up in jiu-jitsu and you concede defeat. People give up just from the pressure, because they're not used to it. And I often give the analogy of, you actually get used to it. It's kind of like if you start learning how to surf, man, you only need to be under the water for like 2 seconds and you think you're going to drown, right? Because you're not used to being forcibly held under the water by a wave. But yes, it's a little different because obviously you can physically drown, right? There's no oxygen down there. But obviously with experience comes the ability to remain calm when you've come off a wave and you're getting tumbled around under the water, So training jiu-jitsu definitely makes you more physically resistant. Like things as simple as that, as having your kid hang from your neck, I bet you is going to bother your wife far more than it bothers you. Okay, it's still uncomfortable for you, but you kind of like whatever,
Like I could stay here all day until I
like it's not even tight.